Amiga, do you ever feel caught between two worlds? You cherish your cultural background, but sometimes it clashes with the realities of raising a family in modern America. You might feel pressured to fulfill traditional expectations, yet you crave a life that allows you to be your true, authentic self. If you're a Latina mom nodding your head right now, I see you, and I get it. Balanced Motherhood is more than your average mommy coaching program. It's a supportive comunidad designed specifically for you. I understand the unique challenges you face navigating between generations and culturas while forging your own path as a mamá. Stop feeling like you have to choose between your roots and your future. Balanced Motherhood empowers you to create a life that celebrates your heritage, embraces your motherhood journey, and prioritizes your own happiness. Spots are limited. Don't miss out on this opportunity to connect with a supportive community and create a more balanced life. Visit the link in the show notes to join the waitlist for the next Balanced Motherhood cohort. I can't wait to meet you. Hola, hola, amiga. As mamás, we have been or will be having many difficult conversations with our peques. Some of these conversations will be related to social justice related issues like racism, poverty, and homelessness. I don't know about you, but I grew up with certain biases about our society's most vulnerable and underrepresented communities. And really, it wasn't until my late 20s when I attended grad school that I learned about the injustices that impact so many people. Now, as a mamá of dos, I want to make sure that my kids don't grow up with these biases and prejudices that many of us grew up with. In order for us to dismantle the way of thinking, we should be mindful of what we say and what we want to model for our kids, so that way they are social justice-minded children. That is why in this episode and critical conversation, we welcome Samantha Siers. Samantha Siers, she, her, is a mom of two, master's level student at the University of Chicago's Crown Family School of Social Work, the program and operations coordinator of Lift Chicago, the auxiliary board chair for San Miguel School in Chicago, and was recently selected as a 2023-2024 Obama Foundation Scholar. Through her personal experience with teenage parenthood, Samantha is passionate about offering robust, equitable support services to mothers of color on Chicago's South and West Sides. Her project with the Obama Foundation centers around creating a resource database that is truly reflective of the unique needs of single mothers. Samantha underscores the importance of instilling in children a sense of social justice, kindness, and thoughtfulness towards others. She believes in leading by example, exposing children to volunteering and societal realities, and having thoughtful conversations with them about the world. Samantha shares great tips and ways in which you can get your family to be agents of change. If you want to be intentional about raising social justice-minded children and want to know where to start, then this episode is for you. So no te lo pierdas. Welcome to the Viva la Mami podcast. I am your host, Jessica Cuevas. I am a mother of two on a mission to help redefine the meaning of motherhood as a modern Latina mom. Motherhood can be a complex journey, interwoven in two identities that often make us feel ni de aquí ni de allá. Viva la Mami is committed to providing you with knowledge, tools, and support to navigate the challenges and triumphs of motherhood as Latina moms. On the show, we'll be discussing culturally relevant topics that will help inform and empower you in whichever season you are in on your motherhood journey. We'll be joined by Latina moms, experts and professionals who can offer advice, practical tips, relatable stories, and honest conversations. So bring your cafecito as I invite you to be a part of this space as we create comunidad about the exciting and challenging parts of being a mommy. Ahora, vámonos. Hola, hola, Samantha. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Jessica?
I am good. Thank you so much for being here. And you, as a mama, as someone who is a working professional and an Obama Foundation scholar, I feel like I would love for you to talk about yourself, but also we can delve further into the conversation about raising social justice minded children. Because I've been wanting to do an episode about this. And so, if you can tell our listeners a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, of course. So my name's Samantha, she, her. I am a mom of two. So I have a 9-year-old and a 2-year-old. I've been married for 10 years now. So my husband and I, we met in high school in Buckeye, Arizona. Didn't really start dating until college. Either he was in a relationship or I was in a relationship, but college came and we were finally both single and we've kind of been together ever since. We started our family really young. My son kind of came on the scene when I was 19, my husband was 21. So motherhood it took me by surprise and it was a whirlwind. It's been a whirlwind ever since, but I love every single moment with my two children and feel really fortunate and so blessed to have them in my life. So I feel like everything I do and everything I am is kind of centered around motherhood, and that's such a point of pride for me is being able to grow this little family. I'm currently working on my master's of social work at the University of Chicago School of Social Work, now called the Crown Family School of Social Work. I really have loved my time there, but in my former life, I was an educator. So I was actually a Title I teacher in back of the yards at a little Catholic school called San Miguel School, and absolutely loved the work that I did there. Only ended up changing professions because I wanted to create more systemic impact in the lives of the students and their parents as well. And so that's kind of where the shift to social work came from. And I've loved all the twists and turns in this professional life of mine and personal life as well.
That is awesome that despite you being a young mom, you still achieved your dreams in terms of becoming an educator and then pivoting towards social work. And I just admire las mujeres who push through, who persevere, despite adversity, and who just continue through and work hard, not only to achieve their own specific goals, but also to show and teach their children that they can also achieve what they want to, even if there are some bumps in the way, even if there are some obstacles that come in the way. So, yeah, thank you for sharing that. And so, what you do now, can you tell us a little bit more about the work that you're doing in terms of being a social work student, but you were selected as an Obama Foundation scholar? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Of course. So, like I said, my professional journey has kind of pivoted and shifted as my interests, have changed, or I saw a need and wanted to fulfill that need. So, when I was working with my students, I really was noticing that a lot of their academic struggles was tied to economic hardship and community violence. And so that's really what created my shift from wanting to get my master's in administration, because I originally thought I was going to be principal, vice principal, dean, something like that, and shift to wanting to get my MSW. Then because I was a part-time student in my second year of my master's program, I did my first internship, and I was placed at a national nonprofit called Live Chicago. And there I spent a year doing financial coaching for predominantly single mothers of color here on the south and west sides of Chicago. And again, I saw a lot of those systemic issues that were impacting my students: a lack of resources, being in historically underfunded communities, community violence, living in food deserts. A lot of the same reoccurring issues that were affecting my sixth through eighth graders was affecting these women that I was coaching that are like 20 to 50 years old, still 2, 3, 4 decades later, those children are still facing the same kind of issues. And so a lot of what I did as a coach was trying to get resources to these single mothers, trying to figure out childcare, trying to brainstorm with them whether it made sense to go back to school or if we could just try to find a higher paying job, or maybe they should just do a certificate instead, right? Trying to weigh out their options. and really build a foundation of financial security. That's really what we're trying to aim to do. And so when I was applying to the Obama Scholars Program, it's incredibly competitive. They only take master students who are entering their final year of school, and you have to be in one of three schools. You have to either be in the Booth School of Business, Harris School of Public Policy, or Crown Family School of Social Work. So thankfully, I was at the social work school, but still, to get into this program, you need to have an idea, a plan, or at least a basic concept of a project that is sustainable, creates impact. It's something that the community needs. The Obama Foundation is especially interested in projects that are going to enhance the lives of folks living on the south and west sides of Chicago. Naturally, the Obamas have very strong ties to the south side of Chicago. And so I kind of was already brainstorming this issue. And so I pitched an idea to the Obama Foundation that I wanted to either create some kind of hotline for specifically mothers of color on the south and west sides of Chicago, or create a resource database. Now, resource databases, they've been done, right? You can look online. We'd have 311 now in Chicago. That's pretty much like a phone database. But they have the same kind of issues that we face at Lyft. Either the resource is too far from our member, they don't have Spanish-speaking services or other languages, they have no space for a person. And so my concept for creating a resource database is it's going to be created by our members and for our members specifically. So if our members engage with a resource that they are enjoying, that they feel like had value, that was able to serve them in the way that they say they're going to be served, then we're going to add that resource to a database because it's been vetted by our member through personal experience. And now other members feel like they can trust that resource more than just like a coach, recommending a resource that they maybe never personally engaged with. They've just heard it's a good resource. No, this is from our members, have already experienced it. They can write a quick review. I'm actually working on a member facing like website where they can log in, they can write about the resource, they can leave a review, kind of talk about their experience. And so it just feels much more personal. It's been vetted by people who needed that resource. And I just feel like it gets rid of that gatekeeping of resources too that we often see in social work. Like you have to go to a social worker to engage in a resource. Me as like a future social worker, I think that's silly too. If our member needs something and like in the moment, like they're having a mental health crisis, they should be able to find that information themselves without having to engage with a therapist or social worker if they desire to do so, if they want a little bit more privacy. So I pitched this idea to the Obama Foundation, never thinking like in a lifetime I would get selected. I had friends doing like incredible work with a lot more funding that still didn't even get an interview. And I still ask myself sometimes, like, what did they see in me to choose me? I'm like an overwhelmed mom of two, like trying to get my life together. But they saw something in my project, my vision, and my experience that says like, this could be really a thing. After like 9 months of mentorship and putting like resources and trainings into this person, like this might come to fruition and really have impact on the south and west sides of Chicago. And like that to me is incredible. Like for someone to really vet you so extensively. They told us on day one of our orientation that all of our resumes have been on the desk of Barack Obama. And he personally read through our experiences and our like little blurbs about ourselves, and he approved all of us to be in the program. So, oh my God, like that to me is like,
yes,
made me so proud of like what I've been able to accomplish, especially like thinking again back to like that 19-year-old that was super terrified of like becoming a mother in just a couple months and trying to figure out life. And here several years down the line, like I have this incredible opportunity that's going to be so impactful in my career for the rest of my career. So I feel really blessed that they saw something in my project that they felt like was worth investing in.
Oh my gosh. Congratulations. I was very excited to learn a little bit more about your story, but now you sharing this, I literally se me enchinó la piel. Like I got goosebumps.
Ay, gracias.
Just because like how you reflected of that 19-year-old girl who was like freaking out about pregnancy and becoming a mom. But look
Yeah.
at so much that you've done in 9, 10 years. And the fact that you are not just doing it for, because you have a good heart, but you're also doing it for moms because perhaps you or someone you knew or know has struggled and needs that specific attention and resources so that way they're not lost in either their mothering, their, journey. And yeah, I wish you the very best of luck in your project and your vision and in making that into fruition. But also the fact that Obama like reviewed your
I
application and
know.
everything. I mean, that speaks a
Yeah.
lot that your vision is going to come true and it will. And I feel like it's definitely needed. So that is awesome. I was going to ask like, have you met the Obamas?
I will be meeting Barack Obama during the Democracy Forum in early November. Barack Obama will be a keynote speaker, and all of the Obama scholars, we're going to be able to do like a little round talk discussion with him and take a group photo. So, like, I'm super excited. And don't tell Barack, but I was really hoping Michelle was going to be there. So, unfortunately, not. But maybe sometime throughout this year. I'm just like blown away. We've already been able to meet such like incredible speakers, like activists, some like politicians here in Chicago, and just so much networking that
Yes.
being able to be in those rooms. My gosh, I never really understood the value of these kinds of connections before. I'm just like so excited for all of it.
Yes. And I see it just like representation matters. And the fact that you are Latina and you did share with me that there aren't as many Latinos in your cohort. And so the fact that you are representing us, I'm really proud of you. And I don't even know you. I feel like this is amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, me and Teresa Barajas, we're the only Latinas in our cohort.
Wow. That's awesome. You did mention that through your previous experience and work, this ultimately led you into, creating a program for moms of color in the West and South sides of Chicago. So how does it impact you as a parent on a personal level?
I've honestly become more thoughtful about parenting the more I've had the privilege to like seek education and engage in education. Because I'm not gonna lie, when I first had my son, it was like all about survival. We did not have money. We had WIC, we had SNAP, we had whatever kind of benefits we needed just to like make it day by day because we were both in school and, doing internships and trying to work whatever hours we could. It was just all about survival. And so I really felt like I started to become more thoughtful about parenting as like I got to sit in some fabulous education classes at Arizona State University, learn about child development, learn about how the brain works, learn about trauma, and really become very reflective on like my own childhood and the kind of childhood I want for my children. And then no one tells you, but social work school is like 3 years of therapy. It really is. Like I did a project that was so life-changing in my family systems class where I was asked to map out 3 generations of my family, which as a Latina, anytime you hear family tree, you're like, oh no, I'm gonna need like 10 pieces of paper. But whatever, I did my family tree going back 3 generations, and we were asked to pinpoint 2 generational patterns. And after we pinpointed those patterns, we had to talk about whether we engaged in those patterns or actively disengaged in those patterns. And so one of them was teenage pregnancy. And so my grandmother was a teenage mom. I have 9 aunts. The majority of them were teenage moms or had multiple children as teenagers. And then myself as well. So that like, wow, I was so reflecting on like what kind of put me at risk for teenage parenting and reflecting on like what do I want for my own daughter. I had a 1-year-old at that time, thinking about like how I don't want her to have to go through that as well and how hard it was. And so I think as I've been able to just spend more time in the classroom and just learning and reading. It's made me a more thoughtful parent. So I'm so grateful for that because I've just learned things that I would have, I don't know, never would have even given thought to before, like how important it is to get enough sleep depending on the age of the child. And like that's nothing that people teach you. You know, like how many times as a child did you go to a party and there's like a baby sleeping at like
Yes.
two, barely going to sleep at like 2 a.m. at like a family party?
Yep. I was
It's
just
just
about
like,
to say that. Yeah.
yes, like
Yeah.
how normal is that? And it's just like learning about how the 0 to 3, how impactful those years are for a child and the developing brain to make sure that they're eating the right things and getting enough sleep and that they're socializing properly and, getting enough outdoor time and, all these things that you were never taught about. No,
Right.
no one teaches you how to parent. You just figure it out. It's like everyone's just thrown into the water and they're figuring it out. So I feel really blessed that I've been able to kind of tackle parenting from a very academic point of view and then also just like through teenage mom trying to survive. So I kind of had both uh, parenting journeys so far and have gained like immense knowledge and strength from both almost
Yeah.
equally. So definitely my academic journey I feel like has impacted my parenting the most.
Yeah, that is awesome. And it's interesting that you said that, you're connecting the way that you're pairing based off of like those two worlds, so to speak, that you had. And for me, I'm all about education. And it really doesn't matter about like the level of education or what have you. You can learn on your own as long as you are curious, as long as you seek different aspects of, you know, inquiry, whether if it's through scholarly journals or podcasts, even books, or even through people as well, just having this variety of capital. And that way you can get better informed in the way that you can parent, right? And I feel like oftentimes as Latinos, we lean in so much on our people, specifically our aunts, uncles, abuelitos, parents, right? And that is the only way that we essentially parent, right? But there is more to that. We get so
Yeah.
influenced by the people that are so close to us, which oftentimes can be toxic. Oftentimes it just doesn't align with your values. And that also has to do with like soul searching with yourself
Yeah.
and figuring out like, okay, what do I want? How do I want to approach this? How do I want to, essentially parent? So it is interesting that you mentioned that, and I'm all for learning new
Yeah.
things as well. And so considering your all of this, right? Your background, your educational background, why is it important to raise justice-minded children, in your opinion?
Yeah, I had mentioned that one of the reasons why I shifted from education to social work is wanting to create more systemic change and kind of get to the root of some of these issues. And, throughout this journey, there's been times where I felt like, are we really going to ever solve this issue? It feels so big. It feels like, I'm just one person. All of us are just, you know, just limited by money, time, whatever have you to try to tackle some major issues. And I think one of the things that continually keeps me inspired and hopeful is raising two little humans that are so at their core like such good people. Like they're genuine, like children are just genuinely kind. I think the world influences them and experience can create some of those like undesirable characteristics, but I do think children are born pure and born good. And it's just their environment that, they kind of shift from that sometimes, unfortunately. And my kids just keep me so hopeful for the future. And so, like I said, I've had the two spectrums of parenting the teenager that didn't know what she was doing but was trying her best to survive. And then, like, us being two professionals now where we're comfortable. We're not wealthy, but we're comfortable. And so our kids have more opportunity and more resources now. And I know more about parenting and the brain and development and all those things. So they've had two very different experiences. But I'm realizing now how important it is to instill these values in my kids so that I can take that pureness, that natural like good that they're born with, and just expand that for a lifetime to something that's beyond themselves. Okay, they're happy, they're good, I'm glad, but what about their neighbor? You know, are they okay? Like, and I want to raise children that are thoughtful about that. And so, this is something my husband and I talk about frequently is like, what do we want our children to be like in adulthood? What do we want them to care about? What do we want them to value? So I really think it's important to be on the same page with your partner. If there is a partner, to like figure out what do you want for your children beyond just like the monetary physical stuff. I'm talking about like the inside. What kind of soul do you want them to have? And so we have discussions about that. And also, I think it's incredibly important for parents to provide that, like, be that role model, to provide that leadership. You guys are the heads of the household, and children will follow suit. If they see you kind of doing something, like they see mom cooking in the kitchen, what do the kids want to do? Oh, I want to help chop, or I want to help peel, or, they follow after what you do. So I think it's very important to take on that leadership role for your children. And so some of the ways that I try to do that is I volunteer my time when I can. As you know, we have a huge refugee crisis right now in the city of Chicago. And so in my free time, I will go and take leftover diapers from our diaper distributions, go drop it off at police stations or with volunteers that can disperse them at police stations. These are things my kids see and they ask questions about. Mom, why is the car full of diapers? And then I'll take a moment to kind of explain. I also did mentoring through iMentor when my son was 3 until he was 5 years old. So I was matched with a senior in high school, and she was going to be first gen, and kind of walking her through the college application process. And so there was times my son would cry because I was going to a networking event with her, and I would just, in the words that a 3, 4-year-old would explain what mom is doing. I'm trying to help a girl go to college. She's going to be the first in her family. Mommy's just trying to make it easier for her. Mm-hmm. So from a young age, being that role model, being that leadership in the household so that your children kind of see a person who is being thoughtful of others so that it becomes normal. This is a way of life. It should be standard for us all to think about our neighbors just as much as we think about ourselves. And I feel really fortunate because I had that role model with my mom and with my dad. They were thinking about other people. And so it just became more natural to me to do so. And I've just kind of carried that along. It's also big that I have a career in social work. So, it's kind of built into my schedule, but even in my free time, trying to model that. And including my kids in that process as well. They be stacking my car with diapers sometimes if I need a hand. So they're involved in the process.
I also have a social justice background with my master's in higher education at Loyola University Chicago, which is very focused on social justice. And it wasn't until then, in my late 20s, that I learned all about the isms, right? All about the inequities. And this is mostly through the lens of education. And I just can't imagine about all other systems that essentially affect individuals, families, generations, right? And so I feel that growing up, I wasn't taught necessarily about these core issues that we see. And kids often question, right? Like, why is there a homeless person? Why is this person asking for money or what have you? And the way that I grew up was like, oh, es porque no quiere buscar trabajo o no quiere trabajar. And oftentimes that led to fear.
It's like us and them. We work, so we have a good life, and they're lazy. They don't want to work, so they don't. Yeah, they're on the, yes, very much us and them.
Yes,
division.
Absolutely. And so how can we help reduce that fear, especially when seeing these inequities in front of us specifically?
Yeah, I think you bring a really good point of like, I am very aware that I grew up with a level of privilege to have parents that, one, my mom had a college degree. My dad did not, but he did have some folks in his family that were nurses, and so, had that kind of more understanding about development, like I had mentioned, and trauma and all those kinds of things. So there's a level of privilege too, because when you're trying to survive, you're kind of cut off from the world and from those educational opportunities, and you just take it day by day. So even if you were not raised by parents that had the time to instill these values in you, doesn't mean that they didn't think they were important. They might have just been trying to survive. And so I think it's important to also be reflective of the level of privilege we have, that we have the time to think about these big world issues, you know, because we know food's going to be on the table. We know our kids have a bed to sleep in at night. But if they didn't, you know, for sure, my mind would be there instead, rather than thinking about, you know, homelessness or the refugee crisis. You know, I would be, I got to help my kids in the here and now. So I understand that for sure. But I think part of, you know, trying to reduce that fear with my children means being open to having those hard conversations. And I think a lot of it, why we kind of just brush off children's questions is like, this capitalistic society, we're always in a rush. We're always trying to get to work. We're trying to get back from work. Like, we're so pressed for time. I understand that as a mom of two who's also in school working. Like, I understand that. But I have really started to understand like the importance of taking a minute, pausing to answer their questions in a thoughtful way that's age appropriate, and that's what helps reduce the fear. So if we see a homeless person, you know, my kids are looking at 1, 2 years old. They acknowledge that there's something different. This person is living on the street. That is not normal. I live in a house. You know, they're making those connections from a really young age. Then you have 3, 4, 5, and up. They start to ask questions in an age-appropriate way. Like, who is that? What are they doing? And then it goes to, Mom, how come some people don't live in houses? Why do they have to live in a street? You know, so their questions become more complex, but the curiosity is always there. So taking moments, even if you don't have a moment in the then and now, maybe later that night, having a conversation about it. Now, what is root cause? Some root causes of homelessness. One, rent is super high. You know, sometimes showing Redfin listings, Zillow, of how expensive apartments are in your area. You know, that's something I've done with my 9-year-old, where he's like starting to understand what a dollar is worth. And he's like, what? A 1 bedroom is $1,500? You know, he used to think $80 in his piggy bank was like, whoa, he's wealthy. You know, that doesn't even cover a meal now for like a family of 4 sometimes. So taking those moments to have those hard conversations, talking about mental health, talking about like depression. You know, sometimes it's like a mental inability to work, not just physical inability. It's a mental inability to work sometimes. Talking about, you know, large ideas, but can be simplified in a way for a child to understand. It takes time. I know it's really hard in the day to sometimes find time, but those 1-2 minute conversations, they don't even have to be long. They just have to be honest with your child and in a way that's age appropriate they can understand, you know, using words that are in their current vocabulary.
Yes, absolutely. And what would you say for parents that perhaps don't know necessarily about why people become homeless, right? Or
Yeah.
just so that we can avoid stereotypes, because that's something that even for myself, that was instilled in me. And so I
For sure.
have to learn, or I have to like read about it, right? So what would you say about that?
If you can volunteer, it's major. I think it's so important to be working directly with the population that we're talking about, so we're not making those like dangerous assumptions. And really, once you kind of step into this world of like social impact and, you know, just change making, it's so easy to get sucked in. There's so many like amazing causes and amazing people that are dealing with these hardships, and you get connected, and then you want to learn more about this and you want to learn more about that. And I'm like in that part of my life. Like I've worked with children, I've worked with single mothers. Like I want to go work with the elderly. What's social work with animals? Like what's that all about? You know? So it's always like learning, but yeah, volunteering, highly recommend if you can. There's so many amazing organizations. Like that's one of the reasons why we moved to Chicago. We're never leaving is how many grassroots organizations there are here. They're doing incredible work that are really the leaders in their space. So there's no lack of volunteer opportunities. Watch the news. We're still very much in that area where people don't know what they can trust and what they cannot. I would say if you can, watch and listen to news from multiple sources so you can expand the perspectives of what you're hearing and then kind of take what you can from those multiple sources. But those two honestly have been the most impactful for me. So you're making the connection to these are some issues. These are folks who are trying to solve that issue.
And as far as with exposing our children, at what age do you think it's appropriate to go out in the community or volunteer with your child?
I believe that parents know their children best, and you know what they can handle in the moment. So parents know their children the best and can kind of figure out what's age appropriate. But generally, I would, for younger ages, recommending starting in the house. There's so many things that you can do from home, which I know firsthand how hard it is to get out of the house to go anywhere, even the grocery store with little kids. Something that you can do for like refugees. You can create meals from home and go deliver them to police stations. That's something that you can do with children. They can help chop. I just give a butter knife and they kind of hack at something and they're assisting. And then pop them in the car seat. We're gonna go and the refugees are like they're at the police stations, they're very like self-organized and become like very self-sufficient. They will come to your car door and help you unload and you know that's already an interaction that the child gets to see. Okay, food is leaving our hands and going into the hands of someone else. Seems so small, makes a big impact. And there's child exposure, but it's not to the point where it's would be overwhelming for a child of that age. So, it can start in the home, very simple things like that. Something I was working on just 2 days ago is I have a member who's like in need of a mattress. So I did like a crowdsourcing on my personal Facebook page. And so my son saw me scrolling on Amazon and I was like, oh, I'm creating a wish list for my member. She's dealing with this. We're trying to get her a mattress. That's why she needs it. And look, mom posted on her Facebook, look at all these great people that are, donating money. We were able to donate, like raise the money in like 5 hours. So that's at home. Honestly, like it's amazing the kind of impact you can make just sitting at home. I was literally just on my phone, tapping around, copying a link, messaging my member, and just within 5 hours, able to get somebody a mattress who's previously sleeping on the floor. So I think sometimes we overcomplicate things in our head. We think like, oh, I have to take my 4-month-old, my 8-month-old to a soup kitchen and try to figure out how to like ladle things while I'm chasing my toddler around. That's like one of the amazing things about technologies. We're so like interconnected now that we can have tremendous impact from our house. So don't overcomplicate it. Don't overcomplicate it. There's so many wonderful causes that you can engage with as much or as little time as you have, as much or as little resources you have. There's so many wonderful options.
Thank you so much for sharing that, because we may put the excuse like, oh, they're too young, or oh, we have to physically be somewhere, like the soup kitchen. I only thought about that. Like that was an only way that you can help out, to the community. And yeah, and I love that that isn't just the case. And so what would you recommend to mamás who are listening on this podcast, or parents who are doing the work, right? And raising social justice minded children who educate themselves, who are out there in the community, but other family members, whether if it's their partner or abuelitos, and they don't. And I'm specifically thinking like perhaps caregivers who watch the kids and perhaps they have different viewpoints or different perspectives. They say it out loud to the children and then they come back home and they're like, well, I'm confused. Should we confront to those specific individuals, or is it sort of like taking it with a grain of salt and respecting whatever their viewpoints are.
I feel like this was such a popular conversation during like the Trump administration. There was like jokes on social media about like this Thanksgiving dinner with the family is about to get crazy. And there was a lot of division amongst families who were having these conversations about all these like big hot button issues, and there was such a divide. Parents need to make the decision for their children that like aligns with their values, but understanding that again privilege comes into play, because if you depend on somebody for childcare, you can't necessarily be like, oh, I don't agree with their political agenda, now I have no childcare, I'm gonna lose my job. So there's a level of privilege too that comes into this conversation for sure. We've had the spectrum. We have, people in our lives that completely agree with our agenda, more or less, and we're fine. We have, people that are very close to us that are complete opposites, and we'll have conversations with our children that I'm like, oh, don't necessarily agree with what you're saying. My son, as he's gotten older, is more aware of the political climate in the United States. And again, it goes back to having these hard conversations with our kids. They're more aware than we give them credit for, talking about how parties came to be in this country, kind of what is the, main agenda of both parties that, both feel like they're doing what's best for their constituents, and, you know, break that down. People that vote for them, right? And age appropriate language. And so this is what mommy and daddy believe. But grandpa or, Tia or whoever, this is what they believe. This is why they believe that. This is why mommy and daddy believe this. When you get older, you're going to have your own opinions on this topic. But let me tell you why, like, mom and dad believe this certain thing. And let me tell you why grandpa or whoever believes this certain thing. So give them the why, because all they hear is like snippets typically from family members or snarky comments or, it's, I find more often than not, people are not sitting down to have a whole political conversation with my kids other than me and my husband. They just hear like little crude comments from other family members. So it kind of comes in one ear, out the other for the most part, but some parts stick. So we always go back and have those conversations. That being said, we've had to end one or two relationships because it was beyond the point that mommy and daddy could just have a conversation about like why that person believes. If it's like inherently dangerous thinking or racist thinking or, prejudice thinking, that's not something I want around my children. And it's hard, but if it's a relationship that can be ended without seriously impacting the child's life, if it's more like a friend that you hang out with sometimes that's having like this really dangerous thinking, I might choose to end that relationship. And that's a really difficult thing. But I'm also raising future adults that are going to be voting one day, and their vote is going to impact everyone else in this country, and that vote has a lot of value. And so I want them to be really thoughtful and not have thoughts that are rooted in tremendous bias and racism. So I have to make, my husband and I have to make smart decisions about that as well. So you have the spectrum of political ideology, and us as parents have to draw the line on like what's not okay, what's kind of snarky, and my husband and I can do some discussion with our child and kind of backtrack on some of that thinking and kind of talk through their thoughts and our thoughts. But parents have to draw the line, and that's one of the hard things of parenting.
It is. And I think it ultimately falls with having this open communication with your partner, if you have a partner, in terms of what their values are, your values are. I know that I know couples who have two very different political views, and I'm like, oh,
Yes.
how do you navigate that? And especially when parenting comes into play.
Yeah.
So it must be difficult, but I think that we shouldn't ignore those issues, especially when kids have questions. And I really love that you talked about how, we should take the time and answer their questions because they are curious. And the way that, that I grew up was we were kind of like the bystanders. We just didn't talk. We just,
Yeah.
we were silent. We didn't speak up for injustice if we noticed it, even though we knew that something was off. And I don't want that for my kids, at least. And I think it starts as early as when they talk and have a conversation with you. And in regards to this, about having relationships with people that perhaps have different political views or just different, viewpoints, yeah, I think it's important for them to also be exposed. And because there is a world out there that unfortunately isn't nice, so, that perhaps they
Yeah.
don't have similar values as you. And so, how will you navigate that? And I specifically think in college, for me, college was something so different that I then came to realize, like, oh, there's people that are literally racist, and how do you
Yeah.
navigate that, right?
And I had a thought about that. It's like, along with, being able to take space in these classrooms, learning about how like our voices have been tactically, quieted
Mm-hmm.
throughout generations. And that's why we don't have these big conversations, is because our power has been very limited as as a people, And that has like ties rooted in like police violence and immigration status and whatever have you, that we felt like we couldn't have an opinion, or there was going to be some kind of issue, whether like imprisonment or being beaten or lynched or deported, or so I think it's so incredibly important to teach our children to have a voice and amplify their voices and their thoughts. And that's why it's so important to let them ask those questions so that they can start to develop this really deep way of thinking, strategic way of thinking, so that they can amplify their voice and be confident in their opinion about the world.
Well, I didn't prepare you for this, but I ask Viva la Mami Motherhood questions that I ask my guests. So it'll just be two. And so, what is the meaning of motherhood?
For me, motherhood has been like an opportunity to contribute to future adults, to society. And man, that's a lot of responsibility. On a day-to-day basis, we're just trying to like get through the day. Sometimes we're trying to like make sure they're fed and make sure they're cleaned and make sure their teeth are brushed and they go to their appointments and they go to school on time. It's so easy to get caught up in the day-to-day like hecticness, that I need to have those moments where I just take a step back and realize again, like, what am I doing as a mother? I'm raising two children so that when they go off into their adult journey, they feel competent enough to take care of themselves and take care of others too. That's something that's very important to us, as you've seen in this discussion, is raising children that are thoughtful about the world they live in, and it's not just all about themselves.
Thank you for sharing that. And what is one tip of advice you have for Latina mommies?
Oh man, don't underestimate yourselves. I had the worst imposter syndrome as a college student in my undergrad, and then something just like switched in my grad school where I'm just like, no more. Like, no more. I have this incredible like resume and so much wonderful experience, and I need to pat myself on the back more, because that imposter syndrome will set in and will limit your vision for yourself and will limit your opportunity, because you will not engage. I have to reflect back and give myself kudos and praise for what I've been able to accomplish in my own lifetime, and doing it as a mother to boot. Like, that's really freaking hard, and like I need to give myself a little bit of recognition for that, because I deserve the space that I'm taking in my classrooms and this program at my job. Like, people don't just give you these opportunities just kind of out of thin air, and I have to continually like reflect and praise myself, because otherwise I will just limit myself to like this little bubble, because I feel like I'm not deserving. And I'm kind of over that portion of my life. No, I am deserving.
Oh, I love it. It's great to claim your accomplishments and all that you've done. And oftentimes in our community, we tend to be very humble. Like, we're so humbling
Yes.
to everything and
Yeah.
everyone. And it's like, no, like, we also have to be able to just believe in ourselves, but know that the work that we do is for a purpose, and be proud of the work that we do and claim it and amplify it. Yeah, and just be confident, I think. So I appreciate all the work that you do. I appreciate you being here and telling our listeners a little bit more about raising social justice minded children. Can you share where people can follow you? And that way we get to support you through this whole process.
Oh, I appreciate that. So I'm on LinkedIn. If you want to know more about the Obama Foundation Scholars, the program, kind of get like a sneak peek on my life, what conferences I'm attending, who I'm getting to meet. I am just Samantha Siers on LinkedIn. Sears is Siers.
Well, Samantha, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it, and you sharing your story and your wisdom about how to raise social justice minded children. I think this was much needed. And I wish you the best of luck. Enjoy your time as an Obama scholar. I love that Obama knows you and knows the work
Oh
that
my
you
gosh.
do, because it is something that is much needed in the community. So thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. I know, still over the moon about it.
Thank you for tuning in to the Viva la Mami podcast. If you like this episode, make sure to leave a review and write what episode really resonated with you. If you really loved it, share it on social media or with an amiga. As always, please subscribe to this podcast wherever you are listening. Make sure to follow me at Viva la Mami on Instagram or visit vivalamami.com. Please note the information shared in this podcast is for educational purposes only and should not be replaced by your healthcare provider nor taken as professional advice.